Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Adjure te spiritus nequissime. Per Deum omnipotentum. The power of Christ compels you. The Ritual Romana was first written in 1614 under the papal authority of Pope Paul V, and today remains in its original form with the exception of two minor changes in the language of the ritual that were included in 1952, one of which was to change the wording that symptoms of possession are signs of the presence of a demon to might be signs of the presence of a demon, reflecting the modern influence of the sciences and potential that states of possession may merely be signs or symptoms of mental illness, such as temporal lobe epilepsy, hysteria, multiple personality, schizophrenia, paranoia, sexual malfunction, and other neuroses brought on by childhood terrors and obsessions. And intriguingly, even in the 17th century, those performing the rites of exorcism were warned against performing the rites upon persons who were not in a state of true demonic or satanic possession. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus et cum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Jesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Adjure te spiritus nequissime. Per Deum omnipotentum. The power of Christ compels you. In the rites as dictated by the Ritual Romana, the exorcist is most often a senior priest who is advised first before going into battle against demonic spirits or Satan himself to absolve himself of all sins through a complete confession, because the demons will attempt to employ trickery and psychological manipulation using this derogatory information against him, as was seen in Faust and his seduction in Goethe. And after this spiritually cathartic cleansing, the exorcist will then don the surplice and purple stole to begin the rites of exorcism, but rarely alone, and analogous to the Troika in Peter Benchley's tale in Amity, finding Brody, Quint, and Hopper being accompanied by a medical physician to care for the physical needs of the victim, and a person of strength, forming a trinity against the forces of evil. Pater Noster, qui es in caelis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tuas, sicut in cielo et in terra. Pater nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitte nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in temptationem, sed libera nos a malo. Amen. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Adjure te spiritus nequissime. Per Deum omnipotentum. The power of Christ compels you. Exorcisms have been performed by various cultures, even outside the Christian faith, for centuries. And during the rites of exorcism, as prescribed in the Ritual Romana, prayers are most often recited in Latin, but these rites are most often misunderstood by most who have heard of this ritual, for it is not essentially a command to cast out a demonic spirit or Satan, but rather as an opportunity to interrogate the spirit that has taken possession of a human host. animating the victim's spirit with their presence in nature, and the very word exousia, the Greek word for which exorcism finds its root, is literally translated as commanding solemnly, under oath or penalty of curse. And at its essence, this is the rite. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Adjure te spiritus nequissime, per Deum omnipotentum. The power of Christ compels you. Still, according to Robin Bridges, author of Witches and Neighbors, the social and cultural context of European witchcraft, possession might be defined as the direct action of the devil, operating on an individual whose own sins had exposed them to this terrible fate. The consensus view is that a possession can't and won't occur without the consent, however minimal, of the victim, but also that this consent most often is implicit and predominantly takes the form of past sins and regrets, making the person vulnerable. This view of possession based upon implicit consent through sin is shared by Jesuit professor Dr. Malachi Martin in his work, Hostage to the Devil. To employ the concept of modern medicine, such as in neurology, a human host becomes infected after exposure to some malevolent agent, at which time they are most vulnerable, having failed to take proper precautions to prevent infection. And like a virus in viable form, the demon outside its human host represents only a potential for animate life, requiring a victim to complete itself and provide an animated expression that replicates itself, hijacks its function, and overwhelms the body with a diseased condition. Ave Regina, Mater Misericordiae, Nostra Vita Docedo, et Spes Nostra, ad te clamamus, exolis filii Habae, ad te mittibus sursum nostra suspiramus, et flentes in ac lacrimarum valle, Aya ergo maxime suavis advocatus, oculus tuus misericordia, erga nos et post ad exilium ostende benedictum fructum ventris tui ejus. O clemens, o pia, o dulcis Virgo Maria. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Adjure te spiritus nequissime, per Deum omnipotentum. The power of Christ compels you. According to the Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 5, exorcism is 1, the act of driving out or warding off demons or evil spirits from persons, places, or things which are believed to be possessed or infested by them, or are liable to become victims or instruments of their malice. 2, the means employed for this purpose, especially the solemn and authoritative adjuration of the demon in the name of God, or any of the higher power in which he is subject. Still, in its form, according to Rosemary Ellen Guiley, author of the Encyclopedia of Witches and Witchcraft, through these rites, the exorcist is engaged in the act of putting the devil on oath or invoking a higher authority to compel the devil to act in a way contrary to its wishes. And in these rites, the exorcist calls upon the demon or spirit to make itself known and to succumb to Jesus Christ and depart the victim and leave the person in peace. Yet in form and expression, the exorcism is essentially a conversation, albeit in adjuration, to obtain access to hidden information, Esoterica during a moment when the devil could be interrogated under compulsion and forced to divulge his supposedly enormous range of knowledge. Anima Christi Sanctifica Me, Corpus Christi Salva Me, Sanguis Christi Inebriate Me, Aqua de la Terre Christi Lava Me, Passio Christi Conforta Me, O Bone Jesus Exaudi Me, Intra Tua Vulnera Absconde Me, Sinite Me, Non Separari A Te, A Nequam Hostum Defende Me, In Ora Meo Amor, Voca Me, Et Ube Me Venere A Te, Ut Cum Sanctus Tuis Ego Sum, Ut Laudum Te, In Secula Secolorum. Amen. Vade retro Satana, Vade retro Satana, Vade retro Satana, Vade retro Satana, Adjure te spiritus nequissime, per Deum omnipotentum, the power of Christ compels you. Under the rites prescribed in the Ritual Romana, the exorcist calls upon the demon or spirit to make itself known. Interrogation to elicit the identity of the demon, who is deceptive and may provide false names simply to deceive the exorcist and misdirect his power and control. Sometimes even granting the false illusion of a successful exorcism when the demon's false name appears to be cast out, while the true demon maintains its hold in retreat on the victim and is given relief, at least temporary, from proselyne pressures. In form like a ruse to provide the opportunity for a feint, perhaps, while the exorcist might be placed under a false sense of security, unaware that he is still in danger, but blinded by the cardinal sin of his own pride. So let us now, with this extended introduction, begin a conversation with the demon. Who has possessed you? Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Vade retro Satana, Vade retro Satana, Vade retro Satana, Vade retro Satana, Adjure te spiritus nequissime, per Deum omnipotentum, the power of Christ compels you. In the opening scenes of the film adaptation of the novel by William Peter Blatty, which had been inspired by a true life story of an exorcism in 1949 of Roby Mannheim, witnessed by 48 people, including 9 Jesuit priests, and recorded by one priest, Raymond Bishop, Father Lancaster Merritt, in the deserts of Iraq, had encountered the spirit of Pazuzu. And almost 3 decades ago, I too was in a type of priesthood in which I too encountered a certain evil spirit. And at one point in the film, after Regan McNeil had been possessed by the same demon, her desperate mother, Christine, goes to Father Damien Carras, a Jesuit professor at Georgetown, and says, "I don't need a doctor. I've seen enough doctors. I need an exorcist." So let's just say that since March 21st, 2020, we have been performing the rites of exorcism in the courts, state and federal, an exorcism not sanctioned by the high priest of the press, seeking to invite the demon to reveal his true name and nature, having been known as a pneumonia of unknown etiology, an invisible enemy, a novel coronavirus, a highly contagious disease, a various descendant variants of concern, given the names from the Greek of Alpha, Delta, Mu, and now a new and dangerous variant that has emerged this week in 43 states. But this week, consequent to requests for documents under the Freedom of Information Act in March 2021, marking the birth anniversary of our rights of exorcism in the state and federal courts, we will be bringing for an emergency application for temporary restraining order against the White House to compel them to cease and desist from withholding essential knowledge about the nature of this beast that has closed churches, schools, businesses, and libraries, prompted stay-at-home orders, facial coverings, mandates, and compulsory vaccinations, and that has possessed you. Under Executive Order 12958, dated April 17, 1995, and signed by former President Bill Clinton, in accordance with Part 1, Section 1.2a, information may be originally classified under the terms of this order only if the information is owned by, produced by, or for, or is under the control of the United States government. And the White House, since March 23, 2021, has refused to respond as to whether the infectious dose and secondary attack rate of COVID-19 standard metrics of risk in epidemiology are classified information. Behold the name of the beast that reveals his true nature. Glory be to God. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Vade retro Satana. Adjure te spiritus nequissime. Per Deum omnipotentam. The power of Christ compels you. And certainly, according to the doctrine of Trinitarian theology, professing a belief in one triune God and Trinity, found in God the Father, Jesus his Son, and Holy Spirit, is the conception of omniscience, the gifts of prophecy, and the revelation of a grand plan. And logically, such an entity would possess the unique advantages of foresight to make proper provision to address the contingency of even an unprecedented pandemic crisis. Might the nation's only physician serving as a state governor have accrued a significant advantage had he possessed the intelligence analytical capability that ABC News and George Stephanopoulos claimed had warned the president last November and would have aided the president in stopping more harm to the United States? Would it surprise you in the least that both Governor Northam and Senator Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence, actually had in their possession direct access to and received information from a retired intelligence officer who actually helped to create that intelligence activity in the late 1990s? Would it surprise you to learn that in a pandemic crisis that has claimed the lives of 2,300 Virginians, over half of whom are the elderly who resided in nursing homes, and from which the city of Richmond, over 60% of the fatalities are African American, despite having an African American mayor and representing only 40% of the population, that these progressive supporters of Joe Biden, who have daily attacked the president for his alleged racism and unconcern, actually ignored that intelligence work product by someone who just happened to have it before a pandemic, or that Governor Northam took the peculiar option to attempt to evade both the sheriff and the United States Marshal, to evade service of process that would have brought him under the jurisdiction of the court, state and federal, to be held accountable and answer serious questions about his COVID-19 response, amounting to obstruction of justice, a federal felony punishable by up to 20 years in prison. Would it be possible for a man with no legal training to be able to bring a governor and an attorney general to that point, absent the intervention of God? On profession of faith, would it surprise you that the same resource rejected by Governor Northam, who had declared to all that he is a great man of faith, was the recipient of a letter from the Congregation of the Causes of Saints at the Vatican, a letter with its own trail of intrigue dating back to the last presidential election, in which Federal Express somehow managed to misplace a parcel to be delivered to the Holy See for 18 days, and only after 9 months had elapsed finally conceded to offer an explanation for the lost parcel, that the Vatican was closed for the holidays for 18 days, preventing their delivery. Wholly unbelievable. Why did the governor and the Senator Warner refuse to accept an intelligence analysis work product prepared by a retired intelligence officer who had helped to create the organization that was supposed to have alerted the president back in the 1990s when somehow, some serendipity gave him that opportunity to acquire that knowledge. Why did Governor Northam choose to obstruct justice by deciding to evade both the sheriff of the city of Alexandria as well as the United States Marshal? And how does a man with no legal training know how to do that? Even further, why has the Board of Elections chosen in this sordid tale to attempt to block that congressional candidate names from the ballot in Virginia's 8th Congressional District, the single kingmaker district that has decided the outcome of statewide elections for the past 20 years? Knowledge of doing harm under the law is never sufficient, but under Farmer v. Brennan, a U.S. Supreme Court case decided in 1994, defendants will only be liable if they know of and disregarded an excessive risk to a person's health and safety. Similarly, under U.S. v. Aguirre, a 1994 case decided by the Ninth Circuit, if the defendant is culpable in causing delay, such as when he actively evades prosecution, the prejudice growing from the delay he caused cannot be weighed in his favor. And under U.S. v. Punjator, a Third Circuit case decided in 1990, evidence of flight is admissible if offered solely to prove consciousness of guilt as to a predicate act of criminality. Regardless of what one feels, that is simply the law. But beyond a matter of culpability attributed to Governor Ralph Northam, and more in connection with a demonstration of this theological postulation regarding the influence of a divine intercession denied to occur under deist doctrine, and certainly atheists' doctrine. And it is the simple probability that the governor, the paragon of compliance with the facial coverings mandate he had issued and had declared as providing safety for all Virginians, a proposition he still maintains, who adhered to his mandate to eliminate a pandemic pathogen, might become infected, while Major Mike Webb, an overweight African-American male over the age of 50 and residing amongst persons of color in one of the top 10 zip codes for COVID-19 infections, a high risk in just about every category except approaching 70 years of age, has remained infection-free, while openly flouting the facial coverings and social distance mandates, declaring that his God is bigger than a coronavirus, and that he has, upon profession of his faith, even brought to court, prompting the governor's flight, apparently in fear of being found culpable for some as yet unarticulated crime. I believe it's one of the most ghostly manifestations that I have ever seen. Whether it is real or simply conjecture, one of those things that people seeking to find some mystery to fool themselves into believing, but with some other perfectly rational cause, is a question that only you can answer with your capacity for reason. Impossible. So was Xeroxing and holography just a few years ago. In fact, so were videotape replays like the one you're watching right now. People have been claiming an existence of God for thousands of years, and maybe one day we will finally know the answers as to how and why and what. What a tremendous gain that would be for science, but what a tragic loss for storytelling. No one knows the day nor the hour when all mysteries shall be revealed, but we'll be watching and we'll be waiting in earnest, incessant, and fervent prayer for the advancement of the kingdom of God. Be sure to join us next time as events evolve with science and faith in a pandemic election that some have claimed is the presidential election of their lifetime. My name is Major Mike Webb, and I am running for U.S. Congress with liberty, honor, and excellence by God. We shall make America great again. Honest.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
Thunk, I could have had a vaccine.